So we're just going to jump right in for this because PowerPoints don't do Webi justice. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The things I'm going to cover for this one are a little bit of things that have come out of the Webi for dashboarding class. We've been holding that class for a few years now, and we learn a lot from the people that attend it. In fact, I just taught it yesterday, and kudos to Jessica because she asked a question, and so we worked it out, and we were, I'm presenting it today. So that's the kind of thing that happens in those classes. So it's always a win-win. So we're going to kind of take it a little bit, some of these things a little bit further. Also, there's just questions that people ask and want to know more about. So like how to make an image transparent, for example, is one of the things I'm going to cover. So 3 things I'm going to cover. I'm going to kind of delve into images and how they might be applied and where things matter. And then I'm going to talk about some specific things for some charts that you may not know about that can help you in your chart formatting. And then I'm just going to touch on the new time dimension piece because there's some options there that you might be interested in. So that's my topics for this half hour. So let's start with images. So with images, they fall into the background. So basically your report, if you go into format report, you can go into here and you can bring in an image to the background of your report. You can bring in an image to the background of a cell and an image to the background like for an individual cell. Under format cell, same thing. So you see you very much looks the same. And for a table. The main thing on the images for a table is that if you put an image in the background of the table, the cells by default, it depends on what you have in your CSS under the hood, but by default, BusinessObjects gives the background of a cell to be white. So you'd have to basically make it transparent, the cells transparent for the image to come through. So that's the only one that's kind of really tricky. And that was a question a long time ago in a SpeakBO that I threw out to the audience, and somebody did respond to me, and I told them I'd send them chocolates, and I haven't done it yet, but it's still on my list. It's like 3 years ago, but I'm gonna send you chocolates. Hopefully your address hasn't changed. So that's a little bit about just the general thing about images and the key there is that they go into the background. So why is that important? Well, if you want to, for instance, have a link from one tab, back to another tab, which is very dashboard-like to have at the top, as opposed to switching on tabs at the bottom. So if we want to use Intradocument Linking, which is what this does, if you look in the background, it's using the format of the Intradocument Linking, and how that's done I'm going to show you in just a second because I'm going to walk through another option. But you can see that once you've attached Intradocument Linking, you click on it, it goes automatically back to that first tab, which is very dashboardy. The problem with that is if you want this to be an image instead of a text. So let's say I want to insert a cell. And I want that to be some sort of image in the background. So I go into my appearance, image from file maybe, and I go choose a file, and I bring in an arrow image. And I upload that, and I'm going to make it stretch so I can make it fit the cell the way I want to. So if I then set up this to be like a backwards arrow, and I could make it transparent and white and all those things. But if I then tried to add Intradocument Linking, so I do linking, Intradocument Link, and I go to by group, which is to go back, and I could add a tooltip, and I say, okay, now I've got that link there, but you see between the two anchors, I don't have any text. And so what that means is, if I click away and go to click on it, it doesn't go anywhere. It has to have some text to click on. One way that people get around this maybe is to add a little bit of text and make it white font. So if I do like, some zeros and stuff, but then you're dealing with some kind of funky stuff. So what's another option? So another option might be to use a symbol instead of an image. So one of the symbols that we've used in some of our dashboarding courses is a character of an ASCII, and the ASCII code is for a house. But I would maintain that the house that's for that ASCII, it's just a square with a little thing on top. It's just not very good looking. There's some better images that you could get. So I want to kind of bring that concept in. And the way you can get some better images is to use different font. And the way you can add font is to have your administrator add it to a font alias XML, which is in the is under the hood. It's in under the Win64, and you could put it under the Win632 under BusinessObjects. There's a font folder, and in it is the font alias XML. So for your administrators out there, this is how that's done. So you can add in some fonts. And for example, I've added in both wingdings, which gives me some symbols. And I've actually also added in Seco options. So I'm going to show those as well. So these are some, true type fonts that are available with Windows, and it's supported to just add them in. So you can do that. So of course you have to restart the server to do that, and you have to get your administrator to do that if you're a Webi person. But I wanted to show that because what that could give you in terms of symbols is now I can add, for instance, in this one, I can add the letter E, capital E, and the capital E for wingding, if I change that font to my wingding font, which appears now in alphabetical order, because I had added my font alias. So I can do wingding, and now I can make that maybe 12 point or 20 point. And now if I take that and make it all the right size I want to, that is a font, that's a text, so it will be clickable. So I can do right click linking, Intradocument Linking, go to my group by group, and now if I click on it, it will go back to by group. So for images, the fact that they're in the background, that's kind of it makes them not clickable on hyperlinks. That's one of the things that, to consider is the fact that it's in the background. When you want it in the foreground, you might want to consider symbols instead because they're text. So another thing about images, a question that comes up a lot is in our class, we do a overlap of an image that's transparent. So for instance, we bring in, so we add a new cell, oops, elements and blank. So I add in a cell and I go get an image. I'm going to show you this image. So I've got a transparent thermometer image. Okay, and I should have made that stretch, but that's okay. We'll just use the same size. All right, so what you'll see is if I put that now on top of this one, I'm not sure why it's not showing the background. I probably have the background of the cell white. So let me make sure, because my image is transparent. Aha, see, there's that tricky, the cells always default to white in the background. It even just got me. So so that's the idea, the idea is I want to make that stretch again. So I can make that the size that I want to. Okay, so now you can see that the transparency comes through because it's not white background. And so the question that comes up in our class is, and you can make this fit to the chart so that the top line is on the top of the chart and all those things. So that, there's lining up issues that you have to do. But the question that comes up in the class, how do I make that transparent? And there's lots of different ways. Of course, there's lots of different image software that's available that will allow you to make things transparent. But just a quick and dirty, you can go to Pixlr. If you're not familiar with Pixlr, it's just an online free editor. So if I go into Pixlr, oh, of course, this is going to take a while. Come on. Anyway, here it comes. Okay, so I can go into Pixlr E and create new. Come on. this is all on my laptop, so it's just decided to be slow right now. Hello. Okay, well, since this is taking forever, I don't know why. Oh, maybe it just doesn't like that I haven't accepted the cookie. You know, that's the way it goes with demos. But basically what you do, I was going to walk through it, but since it seems to be taking a while to load, you create new, and when you create the new one, it's got a transparent background by default. And then you add in your image as a layer. And when you do that, that means it's on top of it. And then you just delete out, you use the wand, you select the parts that you want, and then you delete out the parts that you want to have transparent. So all I would do is I go through and I delete out that part, that white part in the middle of the thermometer to get that transparency. It does have to be a PNG in order to keep that transparency and work with business objects. So you do have to save as PNG, but that's all the default. You can try this out on your own. There's guides online as well on making images transparent with Pixlr, but it's a free online option. So I would just recommend that if you're looking for that transparent look, you can get that. Okay, so we talked about that there's, that I also, in addition to wingdings, I added Seago symbols as well. So if you look at what the Seago symbols are, the format is this kind of funky Unicode type format. And those are read with under HTML. So, so the way I can get the image, and let me back up a little second and say that one of the advantages in this situation is that a lot of times we'll bring in icons to our dashboards, and we want those icons to, enhance the dashboard so that it's really visual. People can click on the icon, and so it makes it very, very intuitive. If you get an icon that gets associated with a certain value, you don't have to read that value. You can just know that that image means that. And that's a very visual thing. We're all very visual people. So, so instead of using an image for your icon, which you can go to Iconfinder.com or various free download options, some of them require that you put a thing that says that you give credit to whoever put it out there. Some things require, of course, a cost, but you can go out and find images for icons. But an option is to use this Seago font, because there's a ton of icons available for that. So like I said, it comes out in this kind of format. And what you do to get the symbol is you would then, first of all, I have to tell it to use the font, which doesn't do anything until I tell it to read as HTML. So here I go to read as HTML. And now I've got various symbols. And those symbols then could be used to reference, I could basically, the peripheral stuff in my product groups are things like keyboards. So I've got a keyboard symbol, and the internals are things like sound cards. So I've got a sound symbol. So network is maybe sending an email, I don't know, some video, a monitor. So the idea is that your dashboard has these icons. You can take a look at them, and it's also not as weighty because you're not bringing in an image, you're just using a font. So there's lots of symbols with the Seago symbols. Again, for some reason, my internet access on this it's taking forever, but if you go out and you look up, it's SEGOE symbol, and it will give you, there's just a ton. I mean, there's some crazy ones too. There's like a roller coaster with people riding down a roller coaster. That was the one that I was going to bring up as an example. But anyway, there's just so many symbols that are available to you with that. So, so rather than having to go out and get an icon, you could just use a font. Okay, so that's enough about images. Any questions about that? Anything that's come up about that? Nope, fantastic. Okay, So the next thing I want to show is some of the questions that have come out with some of the charts that we've created in our dashboarding class. And so there's some, further steps, questions that came that, like Jessica in my class yesterday, Jessica, shout out to you, asked about. This particular example of a dashboard that we use to show in our dashboarding class that you can save a lot of space by using input controls to send what dimension you want to use in your chart and what measure. So for example, if I click on monthly, I'm showing this by monthly, but it's still in the same space. And that's really key when it comes to dashboards, because you don't want people to have to scroll down. You want it to be very, intuitively on the visual page. Same thing with the measures. You could switch back and forth between different measures. The thing about the measures, though, the question that comes up is number of orders and number of products, they're numeric, but revenue and total discount, those are currency. So we want to show the format to be currency format. And in the way we're doing this measure here, if I go down into this, it's saying if the input control, which is called metric, is revenue text, then pass the revenue and etc. So it's specifying which measure object to use when the input control, is a certain text. And instead of doing it that way, since we have two different kinds of formats, we can't do conditional formatting with charts with Webi. That's kind of a bummer, but there's ways that we would get around that. So the way we can get around that in this case is to create two different measures. And if we create two different measures, then one of them we can format as currency, and the other one we can leave the regular numeric format. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through that. So first I'm going to turn it into just a vertical table, and I'm going to switch these out. So I've got instead a measure. Here we go. Measure 2A. Let's see. So this one is the total discount or the revenue. If you look at the variable, if it's total discount, then total discount. If it's revenue, then revenue. So that's going to be the one that I want to be currency format. And this is going to be the one that I want, which is just the other two, the number of orders and number of products. This is going to be the one that I want. And right now it's not showing because my input control is on revenue. So it's just not showing. But we can still format it. So we can bring it in. We can say, okay, the format that I want for this one is just, I want it to be commas. So I'll put in the commas, but no decimal points. And then this one, I want it to be formatted as currency. So I do that format. And then now that I've got the two formats, I can turn it back into a cross or column chart. And I'm going to make another change. I'm going to turn it into something else in just a minute. But first, I'm going to do this piece. So now you can see that if I switch on, the first thing I want to do is actually add the data labels. So I'm going to go in to format chart. So I'm going to data labels, global, and add those in so that they display. And I'm going to make these, I'm going to get rid of my legend. Let's do this first. Let's not get rid of that. Okay, and I can go back in and make the blocks bigger. I could go back in, which is always good to do. If I go in, not that one. If I go into, display, I'm forgetting. We'll leave it at that because I'm forgetting on the top of my head. But there's a way to make the blocks bigger, wider. I just am forgetting where it's at. That kind of happens sometimes with all the different options in the formatting. And you're under the gun with the presentation. But anyway, so you can see that this is currency. And now if I switch to number of orders, it's not currency. It's just the numeric. Of course, we want these to appear the same color. So we want them to, we'd go into the data series, set the color as whatever color we want them to do. Let's say we want them to do dark red. Oh, I don't like that. Let's make it dark blue or light blue. And do the same thing with the other one. So the other series pops up when I do revenue. Light blue. Oops, custom. And light blue. Okay, so this is all well and good. Now we have the two different colors because we put them in two different series. We put them in, one in one data series and one in another data series. At issue though is that you'll see, especially when you've got it by quarter, you'll see them, in the different positions. So if I switch it over here, you see it kind of move over, and that's maybe okay for some users and not okay for other users, so let's make it a little bit better. So instead of having it be a column chart, we could of course make it a stacked bar chart. So if we change it to be a stacked column, then we say okay, then they'll be in the same position. So that's the key there. So now it's not moving around, they're both in the same position. So of course we don't need this value, and we change our, so I'm going to go ahead and hide this piece, value axis. I always say axis. And I'd probably change this to go back to our title, which is the custom title that says time dimension, let's see, metric by time dimension. Oh boy, time is running out. Why isn't time dimension working? I'm going to run out of time because we are so close. Time period, I would call it time period. That's why that doesn't work. And okay, so now I've got basically my conditional formatting of currency versus number of orders. So it's a little bit of a trick involving two different series and then using the stacked bar chart. So similarly, and I know I'm running out of time, but similarly, we have another chart where we kind of do the same thing in different series, but we've got a second series that we want to display. So in this case, it was just, it's one thing displays all the time. So so we just had those two settings. But in this one, we're showing last year revenue and then this year revenue highlighted depending on what level the revenue is. And so this one, again, no conditional formatting available with Webi, so you kind of have to put them into different series that then have different colors. But we would want to then, create this as a stacked bar chart to in order to have it so that they're closer together. So they're not like this one is obviously inside, this one's outside, and this one's right next to the last year. So they're all separate columns in that thing. So we want these three to be stacked, but we don't want this one to be stacked. Because we do want it to always appear, otherwise it would be like gray on top of the green and gray on top of the yellow and gray on top of the yellow and gray on top of the red. So let's not do that. So what we need to do is we need to make it a two axes. So we go in and we format chart. Oops, not format chart, turn to. And we're going to do the two axes option. And here we've got it put my last year up in the axes one. We don't want that. We want it to be the three different revenue types for this year revenue, but then this one will be the last year's revenue. So I say, okay. And now we've got things a little bit better. So we've got these on two different axes, which is going to allow us to treat one of them different from the other one. So let's go in and treat them differently. Now, what you'll notice here is the two axes are on different have different maximums. They both start with 0, but they have different maximums. So the first thing we want to do is, because we're going to just want to show one of the axes and have it apply to both of them, that's the look that we're looking for. We're going to want to remove this. So we want them to be the same maximum. So we'll just go in and set that maximum. And then of course we want these 3 colored ones to be stacked, but this one not to be. So we're going to do that. So I can go into Format Chart and my value axes 1, and I can set the maximum value to be the maximum of this year, revenue this year. Let's get rid of my 0. Change that to max. And then I'm going to copy that because I'm going to do that for the same for the other one as well. So I'm going to say that one, and then I'm going to do value axis 2. So same thing. So now what we'll see is they're both up at the same level. So now we can get rid of this one. We cannot show it anymore because this one basically applies to both. So that's great. So we can get rid of, whoops, I can do this shortcutted. Oh, right here, jump me right to it. And I can get rid of this one. This one is, make it not visible. All right, so now we have that last piece, which is and we can change the format of this. I know that 41 is driving people crazy, but I'll get to that. But last piece is to make these stacked. So if we go into the value axes 1, we can go into globally stacked on that. And you'll see that if I can pull it off to the side, now they line up. And so it looks as if these are actually conditionally formatted on the same series, but it's really a different series. So that's what's cool about that, right? So let's get rid of that 411 thing. Oops, down. I'm going to go up with a unit scale factor. It'll look a little bit better. So, and I want it to have an M at the back end of that. So I'm going to go back into that value axes and scroll down, and I'm going to add in my M custom format. All right, so that's looking much, much better. So I've got this, smaller axes. These are all lined up, and these are all together, and everything matches up. So that's kind of taking that an extra step. So that's the same concept of conditional formatting, but in just another step, you have to have that second series or second axes in order to put these side by side. So, and of course, you'd be limited to just 2. You wouldn't have a third because you can't have a third axis. So that's kind of a bummer. All right, so that's images and chart that I wanted to show. By the way, I didn't mention it on this one, but Need for Viz, and we've talked about Need for Viz before, but Need for Viz has a chart that allows you to input in an image, and then it's one object as opposed to a picture layered on top of another. The picture layered really can be problematic because you can't, for instance, put data values on here. You wouldn't see them unless they were really skinny. If your data values went across, they'd be behind the image. So there's issues with the fact that these are an image on top of a chart. The Need for Viz takes care of that. It's all in one object. So you can do data values on top of the image and so forth. So it's much better. Need for Viz just takes care of all that. Okay, so the last thing I have that I want to point out is another thing that is useful, and in one of the most recent, or I guess it's like maybe since Service Pack 6, can't remember, but there is the ability to create time dimensions off of your dates. So you can go just right click on a date and say create time dimension, and if you look at that, it comes up this screen. And that'll give you your year, semester, quarter, month, week, day. So some of the major ones that you might want off of a date object. So if you need that, you need to know, rather than having to do year of and creating a variable, it's shorter and quicker and, you know, easier to do. But even better, it allows you to set a fiscal year relative to your date. So if your fiscal year starts in April, then it will allow your year value that you're getting, or this particular object or calculation, to be based on the fiscal year as opposed to the actual year. So for example, I've applied this. This one's actually showing, if you look at the data, it's by month, order month, and it is coloring the chart according to fiscal year. So you're seeing it January through December, but 2010 goes to here, and then 2011 fiscal year starts. So again, another kind of concept of maybe conditional formatting, but it's actually using that order time dimension. The problem is if you've got other data in there and there's, you know, data associated with, you can't filter out 2009 here. So it's kind of there's some little things that are still outstanding, I think, on this time dimension that come up that are a little bit buggy. Not buggy, but, you know, just don't do exactly what you want them to do. So there's a couple of other options I've been starting to think about, to be honest with you. And one of them is, because we've got shared elements, we could, in an environment, just create our own little calendar table and bring it in and bring in the data via Excel spreadsheet and have that available to people to join to their date. Or it could even be a calendar table that joins on month, which is really nice if you're thinking about it. If your data, if your query becomes huge because you've added all that the rows for the date, then you're getting, you know, you may be getting, you may not want to display that. Maybe you just want to display month, but you're bringing in dates so that you can use the time dimension. And really that's, you know, then you're getting into things taking a long time. So there's lots of reasons that you might want to use a time dimension, you know, spreadsheet that you can bring in the data specific for what you want. So, I mean, the other thing, of course, is that you can create that spreadsheet with a lot of other options of the date format that you might want based on your date. And then you can join on the date, you know, merge, not join, but merge on the date in your data set. So just, you know, you could put your fiscal year. And the other nice thing about that is you're not setting that fiscal year at the report level, you're setting it at this spreadsheet. And if it's linked as a shared element, you could change your fiscal year. Like if you're, for some reason, it goes instead of April, they change it to February, you could change it in the spreadsheet. And if it's set to automatically change with the shared element, it would change automatically in those reports. So kind of playing around with the idea of using a shared element time dimension table. So those are the things that I wanted to show.